Okay, so now we get into the fun stuff, factoring. So all factoring is breaking apart the stuff that you FOILed. So this time, instead of giving the two parentheses and you have to multiply them together, now you're given the answer and you have to break it apart and figure out what you multiplied. So in 10.5, we're going to start you off a little nicely. Notice that normally it's ax squared plus bx plus c, but notice what we're doing. All of the ones we're going to do today, a is going to equal 1. There won't be a number in front of the x squared. There's a 1, but we don't show it. So what we want to do is I want to figure out what multiplied to make this. So I'm going to try to break it apart. Give two parentheses. You're going to fill in the first terms first. So how did I get x squared? Well, if you just cut the power in half, and I say cut it in half because sometimes you might get x to the fourth as your first term. So then in your parentheses, you'd put an x squared and an x squared. You just cut the power in half. But for right now, all of them are going to be x squared. So how do I get x squared? It's x times x. Now I want to find two numbers that multiply to give me c. So bring my x's down. So what numbers multiply to 18? Well, I've got 1 and 18. I've got 2 and 9. And I've got 3 and 6. Those are all my options to multiply to make 18. But the two numbers that I pick have to add or subtract to give me the middle number. So I'm trying to get a -7. So if I combine 1 and 18 by adding or subtracting, can I get a -7? No. 2 and 9, can I combine 2 and 9 to get a -7? I can. So it doesn't matter which one I put where. I'm going to go this way. It's the signs that will be important. So how do I get a -7? Well, I would need to do a +2 and a -9. Okay, so pause that and fill that in because I'm going to scroll down. Okay, so here's what we just had. We just had c plus 2 and c minus 9. Okay, now it doesn't matter. I could also have put c minus 9 times c plus 2. It doesn't matter which one goes first, but the signs, if I need 9 to be negative, no matter where I put that parentheses, that negative needs to be with the 9. Okay? Now, if there's a whole bunch of rules that can help you with the signs. If your last number is negative, then you must have opposite signs. Okay, so I had, did I say C? Sorry, these were X's. Whoopsie. Okay, so I had x squared minus 7x minus 18. Notice that because my 18, my last number is negative, I wound up putting opposite signs into my parentheses because these numbers are multiplying to make a negative. So a positive times a negative gives you a negative. And the bigger number is always going to get the same sign as the middle. Like if I needed to wind up with a negative answer, then my bigger number needed to be negative. So that's why the 9 became negative. If your last number is positive, then both numbers have the same sign as the middle term. So let's do some examples here. Set up your parentheses. How do I get m squared? It's m times m. Now, I want two numbers that multiply to 18. 1 and 18, 2 and 9, and 3 and 6. I want to see you list the options. So if you're playing around with numbers and you can't figure it out, I can help you narrow it down. But I need to see you list all the factors of the last number. Now, which of these pairs is going to give me a 3? Well, not 1 and 18, not 2 and 9, but 3 and 6 can be added or subtracted to give me a 3. I need a -3, so my bigger number has to take the sign of that. The other one's got to be positive because they have to multiply to be a -18. And there is your answer. Now the next one. Set up your parentheses. Y squared is y times y. I want to list all the numbers that multiply to make 12. 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. Which ones can add or subtract to give me a 7? Not 1 and 12, not 2 and 6, but 3 and 4 sure work. Now they have to multiply to be a positive 12 and add up to be a positive, so they both need to be positive numbers. Also, if there's no negative signs in your problem, don't put any negative signs in your answer. All right, last one, I think. P squared is P times P. 7, well that's easy, it's just 1 and 7. Can 1 and 7 add or subtract to make 8? They sure can. Now, they have to multiply to be a positive 7 rather, which means they have to have the same sign. But they have to make a negative 8, so they both have to be negative. There's your answer. Okay, so you just have to play around with the numbers, but remember, you always want to multiply to give you C and add or subtract to equal B. Okay, and just play around and figure out how that works. Okay, now the last part. Now we're going to still have to solve these equations, but this time they're not factored for us. In the last section, they were already broken up into parentheses, but now that we know how to do that, we need to do it. So, first, I always want to make sure my equation equals 0. Well, the first one it does, so that's good. Now I go ahead and factor, which means give me the parentheses. How do I get x squared? X times x. I always want to multiply to try to make the last number, so 20. I can do 1 and 20, 2 and 10, or 4 and 5. Which combination also gives me a 9? That would be 4 and 5. I have no negatives in my problem, so everybody's positive. Now it's just like 10, 4. Now I do my mini equations. So set each one equal to 0 and solve. Minus 4, minus 5, and you get x equals negative 4 and negative 5 as your two answers. You could also use the quadratic formula and you'd get these same two answers, but factoring can be a little bit faster. Okay, now this one does not equal 0, so let's make sure I make it equal 0. So add 34. X squared minus 15x plus 36 equals 0. Now I need to factor this. So I give my two parentheses. X squared is x and x. Now what makes 36? 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, or 6 and 6. Which combination is going to give me a 15? That'll be 3 and 12. Now they have to multiply to make a positive 36, so they're both going to be negative because I have to add up to a negative 15. Do your mini equations and solve each one. And you get x equals 3 and 12 as your two answers. Okay, and there you go.